people who are looking at Brazil's democracy are looking, as I said, at the divided nation. You saw probably a recent article that was written about you saying that, you know, half the population loves you, half the population despises you. I wonder what you think about that, but also, more importantly, the fact that unifying Brazil is apparently going to be the key to shoring up democracy and making sure that Bolsonarismo does not come back after your term in office. How do you do that when half the population, as I said, despises you?
Well, we're going to have elections in Brazil after the U.S. elections. And let's see what's going to happen in the U.S., because here there's also a split, much more or as serious as Brazil. The Democrats and Republicans are very split up. Love it or leave it, that's more or less what's going on. So in Brazil, we are a country that have more peace. The Brazilian, in his way of life, he likes to enjoy music and soccer and carnival. We're not a warrior. We're not a people that has that culture to hate. We don't have the hatred culture. What happened is that we had a fake news manufacturing, an industry that we not managed to fight under equal conditions. And I am convinced that not everybody that voted for Bolsonaro follows Bolsonarism. I am convinced that a lot of people that voted for him, maybe they don't like the Workers' Party, they don't like Lula, maybe. But when we win an election, we have to rule for everybody. I don't want to know if the mayor of one city or the governor of a certain state is in favor of Bolsonaro. I want to know if his interest or her is interested to resolve the problems of the Brazilian people. If he's interested in that, he could come and join me. An election will always be split when you have two candidates running. It's always split. In Germany, it's split. In France, you saw Macron's election in France. There was a split in the nation. Here in the U.S., the only strange thing that happened was happening here at the Capitol, because we never could we imagine that in a country that was the symbol of democracy in the world, someone could try to invade the Capitol, or that someone could be so inhuman as Trump was. And Bolsonaro is a copycat, a faithful copycat of Trump, as if you would put it in a machine and take a photograph. It'd be the same thing. Bolsonaro and Trump, they don't enjoy trade unions, they don't like business sector, they don't like workers, they don't like women, they don't like black people, they don't like to talk with the business sector. That it's him and his lies. It's just him, and he doesn't enjoy to talk to the press. And so we changed all that. We changed all that, my dear Christian. And Brazil slowly will come to have an encounter of itself, and democracy will prevail. That's my commitment, and I hope that from 4 years from now, you can come back and make another interview with me, and you'll see how Brazil has still continued democratic. And let me tell you one more thing. Bolsonaro, there's no chance for him to come back to the presidency of the Republic. Now it's going to depend on our capability to build a narrative, the correct narratives about what he represented to Brazil in the past. Because the extreme right is around the world. It was in the U.S., it's in Brazil, it's in Spain, it's in France, they're in Hungary, they're in Germany. And so that is to say, we have now an organized extreme right in the world. And if we're not careful, this will be a Nazi attitude from them. This is a denial attitude that we've never seen before. And so since I enjoy democracy, and it's democracy is the best way for you to exercise power, to live with democracy and with the others with diversity, I'll talk to President Biden to improve our political relations, our cultural relations, our commercial relations between the two countries. The U.S. is very important for us, and I believe that Brazil has also certain importance for the U.S. So what we want is the two big nations that are truly democratic, that they could help each other to strengthen democracy around the hemisphere, the Latin American continent, and around the planet Earth.
You talk a lot about democracy, Mr. President, and it looks like you're going to come up against President Biden on a key defense of the United States of democracy around the world, and that is Ukraine. You do not believe, I don't think, in the Western support for Ukraine's defense, and you have said it many times. Why not? I mean, some people have asked, in fact, an article, why is Lula so committed to democracy at home and not abroad?
Veja,
Well,
eu estou muito comprometido.
I am highly committed with democracy in any part of the planet Earth.
Eu acho que no
What
caso
I
da
believe is that in the
Ucrânia,
case of Ukraine and
preciso
Russia,
ter alguém
it is
que fale
necessary to
paz.
have someone talking about peace.
É preciso que se
It's necessary
crie
that we should
interlocutores
build
para
up
tentar conversar com as
interlocutors to
partes.
talk with the different parties that are in confrontation. That's my thesis. We need to find interlocutors that could sit with President Putin and show to him the mistake that he made to invade the territorial integrity of the Ukrainian territory. And we have to show to Ukraine that they have to talk more so that we can avoid this war. We have to stop the war. And so why I'm going to talk with President Biden, I don't know what he's going to say to me, but what I want to say to him is the following. It is necessary to build a set of countries to negotiate peace.
But you have those countries, the BRICS, you're one of them. Russia, China, India, none of them seems to want to talk about peace. They're just basically talking about Russia, helping Russia.
Eu quero falar sobre paz.
Well, I want to talk about peace. I want to talk about peace with Putin. I want to talk about peace with President Biden. I want to talk about peace with Xi Jinping. I want to talk about peace with India, with Indonesia. I want to talk to peace with everybody, because for me, the world will only develop itself if we have peace, if we have tranquility.
Okay, that's nice, but do you believe that a country which is a sovereign, independent, democratic country, like your own, like Ukraine, has the right to self-defense and to defend itself against an illegal invasion?
Lógico que ela tem direito.
Of course it has the right to defend itself.
Lógico que ela tem
Of
direito
course.
de defender, até
Of
porque
course it has
passou
that
por
right, because the invasion wasn't a mistake on the part of Russia. Russia couldn't have done that, and after all, it was part of the UN Security Council. And so this was not discussed at the UN Security Council. So what I want to say is the following. What have been mistaken is already done. The mistake was already done. Now we have to find people to fix the mistake, to fix the error that was made. I know that Brazil doesn't have that international political clout to promote that in this perverse rationale of conflicts in the world. But I can say to you that I will dedicate a lot of my time to find a way, a road, for someone to start talking about peace. I was with the German Chancellor a week ago.
And he asked you to
went
send his
Brazil.
leopards to Ukraine, and you said no.
Não, era mandar munição.
No, it was not the tanks, it was ammunition.
Okay, or ammunition.
It was. I didn't want to send, because if I sent to the ammunition, I would join the war. If I send the ammunition from Brazil, the ammunition that you're asking for,
But you just agreed that it was defense.
this will take us to war. I don't want to go join the war. I want to end with the war. I don't want to join the war. I want to end with the war. This is the dilemma, and this is my commitment. And so now I'm visiting China next March, and I'll talk a lot with President Xi Jinping about the role that China has to play on the peace issues. And this is my work. This is the work that I have to do. I started with the German Chancellor. I talked with Macron on the phone. I'll talk with President Biden. Now I'll talk to Xi Jinping, with the Indians, with all the countries. We have to have a group of people and countries that talk about peace, not war, peace, and show that peace is the only way that can reestablish the dignity of human life, the right for them to work, to live with dignity and decency. This is what Putin has to understand, and Zelensky and the Ukrainian people and the Russian people has to understand. But we have to build a narrative for peace, because Russia is not a tiny country that you can treat it as a small country. No, you have to build a narrative that gives the Russians the minimum of conditions to stop the war. Whereas the U.S. stopped the war in Vietnam. It wasn't easy for the U.S. to stop the Vietnam War, and it did stop one day. It had to stop the war. And so if they started doing wrongly, now we have to fix it. Let's stop the war, and then let's discuss on the negotiation table, around the negotiation table, what we want truly.
Okay. Can I ask you a final question, personal question? You've had a dramatic life story, a dramatic comeback to power after having been in prison. You also have survived this January 6th challenge, this insurrection. You're also the oldest Brazilian president ever to be inaugurated. President Biden is one of the oldest American presidents. What drives you on? What drives people like you at your age to keep doing this?
Amapur, eu digo sempre o seguinte.
What I say, I always say is that aging only exists for those that doesn't have to fight for a cause. If you have a cause to fight for and you dedicate to that cause, Aging doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It disappears. That's why I say every day. I have 77 years of age, and I say that I have the energy of a power of someone that's 30 years of age. I have a willingness to work 24 hours a day. I don't sleep because I have a home. My home is the Brazilian people. I have to improve the lives of my people, that they can eat 3 meals a day. We had ended with hunger in Brazil, and now we have 33 million people that are in hunger. In a country that is the third largest food producer in the world, the country that has the largest animal protein production of the world. How can you explain that people are in hunger in Brazil? And so once again, I'll end hunger in my country. Once again, we're going to do that the Brazilian economy goes back to growth. And once again, we'll create jobs. This is what I want for Brazil. I saw Biden's speech yesterday on the State of the Union. I read his speech. I think it's a speech that I could make it in Brazil very easily. If I did his speech today in Brazil that Biden did some days ago at the American Congress, I would be called communist in Brazil if I made that same speech. The market forces will call me
You know
communist.
they do call you communist, your detractors. Anyway, on that note, thank you very much for being with us.
Obrigado a você, Mapô.
I want to thank you, Amapur.